So, as it's been a while, we thought we would have a talk about what we're doing ourselves personally with our food, nutrition, and our movement, and some of the
I'll
other
put, I'll put
things.
mental aspects in the description as
Yeah,
well. Let you
yeah,
know.
okay. hmm So, yeah, our current experiments. Um, so, for you, Mike, I think you said the other day it's nearly 2 years, or is it 2 years
That
has
is
passed
true.
since you
Well,
started going carnivore?
on April the 13th, 2023, I didn't know I was doing carnivore then. I started a protein sparing modified fast, which is basically around 800 calories, 200 grams of lean protein each day, specifically to try and lose weight. And that was on the back of one of Keegan Smith's videos about the quickest way to improve athletic power. And it was through me then trying to research the backside out of protein sparing modified fast that I came across the carnivore diet in much greater detail. I think I'd seen it previously flash up and I just sort of ignored it as ridiculous. Um, but then I started coming across more and more and started, I like the claims of some of it. So yeah, so I did about 3 weeks on the protein sparing modified fast and then decided, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this as an experiment, 30 days first off, and 2 years in now. So yeah, and
Yeah, what are your
actually,
thoughts? What are your thoughts on it? Quick review of the last 2 years, and where do you see yourself going with it?
yeah. So as a weight loss tool for me, it was great. The protein sparing modified fast was horrible to do, so I wouldn't. Well, I don't know. I say I wouldn't recommend people to do it. It really inspired me into doing it. It was quick, rapid weight loss, which I'd having been a personal trainer, have been thought, we've always been taught that's not safe. But when I actually dug into the research a little bit more, there was actually a fair bit saying, yeah, it was fine. And people who got rapid weight loss were more likely to keep it off in the long term. So I just took the plunge. I think the ADHD side of me just like, well, I'm not going to go slow and steady because that's really frustrating. Um, but then I researched the hell out of carnivore whilst I started it, and I had some of the regular issues, the diarrhea and stuff to start with, but actually within a couple of weeks, I was flying high. And so much so for the first few months, mum and dad even changed to a ketogenic diet or a very low carb diet for a while, back on the increase in energy they saw from me. And that was just day to day energy of doing daily tasks. So not sports performance energy. Um, so I have to say, mentally, everything improved dramatically. I had the odd day where I fell off, Father's Day and stuff like that, and I would get really raggy in between when that happened. So the difference in my mental state was very, very noticeable. The difference in my pain, day to day pain from playing squash and being on court all day coaching and stuff, that again was the other massive thing that really helped stay the board. And the fact that I talked to enough people, especially in Uncom at the time, about how long adaptations might take. From a squash performance view, my performance dipped probably for about 5 or 6 months before I got back to where I was. The squash levels, which is a ranking, a worldwide ranking. So I got back to the same level. And by that time, I was actually nearly 2 stone lighter. So probably from a pure per kilogram energy producing capability, I don't think I was anywhere close to what I could be yet, because actually a lot of my performance increase came from just being lighter and how much easier it was to shove my weight around court. The pain, though, was very different. That was noticeable, not just down to being lighter. It was because when I've had a takeaway or alcohol and stuff at this weight, then playing squash, the pain the next day is horrible. Um, So yeah, mentally great. Day-to-day mental energy, great, much better. Squash performance, as I say, measured on an absolute level from my squash levels thing. That was, as I say, yeah, it took 6 months, and then over the following 2 years, I then hit each year a subsequent new personal best at the age of 57 and then at the age of 58. So I can't really knock that. I did find first Christmas horrible. Not horrible, but I got tempted into trying a few chocolates and stuff, and then I had 2 or 3 months of colds and stuff after that. I ate a lot more chocolate and desserts and regular food that Christmas. And it actually, one of my clients said, well, I'm not going to try carnivore because you keep getting colds the whole time. But then I explained, actually, well, it's only when I reverted back to some of the old food that I was doing that I started getting the colds. And I'd learned by that stage that glucose competes for the same receptor sites as vitamin C, or the same transporters. So the more glucose you eat, the more sugar, carbohydrates you eat, the more vitamin C you essentially need. So that was an interesting piece of knowledge. Borne out by my experiences. When I don't have any carbs at all, I don't get colds. When I start having some, I seem to start picking them up. So I've recently gone back to being really, really strict. I'd gone through a phase of eating chocolates at night. A handful. I was still possibly ketogenic at that stage because I was maybe having 20 to 30 grams of sugar. But even that for me was seeming to have an effect. So I've gone back to being strict again. I'm cutting caffeine down again, and I'm feeling great on the back of it. But I am also experimenting with MCT oil and exogenous ketones as well.
Mm-hmm.
Probably at the lightest weight I've been since 18 or 19. So I'm down at around 67 kilos now, which is about 10 stone 8, 10 stone 9. I was 12 when I started the experiment. I stayed around 70 kilos for a long time. And then just in recent weeks, since I think really trying to hit ketosis a bit more, taking on the MCT oil, upping my fat levels, because I think one of the reasons I was craving chocolates at the end of the night because I wasn't actually eating enough. And then I get to this state where I needed these chocolates. So I've upped my fat content primarily by having cold butter with my meat.
Let me just jump in there a second, because I think people who haven't tried carnivore might assume, or some people who are trying carnivore might assume it's just about eating a load of meat. That won't work very well for most people. A lot of the meat that is available to us is quite lean.
Too lean, yeah.
Yeah. So meat is generally advertised as if it's lean meat is generally advertised as something positive. But if you're not consuming any carbs, you need to get some energy from somewhere. And most of the cuts of meat that are available to us probably don't have enough fat to replace the carbs as an energy source. So it's really easy to fall off the carnivore thing quite quickly because you're not getting enough energy in. You might get some results in the short term, but I've spoken to people who've tried it and given up after a few weeks. They get some initial weight loss, but then they're just hungry all the time, simply not eating enough fat. And that is quite an alien concept, having us all been brainwashed that we shouldn't eat saturated fat. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to explain that point a little bit. So you're increasing fat, so
and actually
give
losing
me
more
some of
weight.
your reasons. Yeah,
Just like I said, I was coming home. I mean, to give an example of my active days, I could be on court for maybe 3 to 5 hours coaching. 2 of those hours maybe coaching one-to-ones where I'll be playing condition games. So that's maybe we're just going to play in half the court, but we're going to play length rallies, etc. So it's not full on squash, but that'll be going for 45 minutes to an hour. I may may do that twice, 2 or 3 times, and then I'll have group coaching sessions where I'll sometimes join in with the play and stuff like that. And I was never really hungry, but then late at night, I got into this habit of having Greek yogurt with honey, and then these dark chocolate ginger chocolates that Mum buys from Waitrose, and they're really nice. But I just found a few different things. I just didn't feel right somehow. You know, I talked about that amazing energy wave that Mum and Dad saw, and I just wasn't feeling that. Now I don't know whether that can go on forever, but I do feel, I feel a little bit there now, and I've had some ketones coming into this. I have had quite a big meal today already. But I worked out I wasn't eating enough, and I did get worried because I dropped quite a bit of weight very quickly, and it was almost like, oh, that's too much, and I don't necessarily want to be down here just yet. And so I started having the butter on many of the carnivore forums. That was the easiest way to jack things up over the years, and it was nice. It made the dry meat taste nicer. Like you say, many of the steaks, even the ribeyes, the so-called fatty steak, isn't fatty enough for me. So just having a slice of butter on that made a big difference. And mentally, I've had much more stable energy through the days doing that. I'd say it's all pretty positive at the moment, and been getting some really positive comments from people, maybe people who haven't seen me for a while. You're looking really good, stuff like that. There's the old guy at the tennis clubs as well. Whatever you're doing, it might not be what they recommend, but it certainly looks like it's working. So
how many teeth have fallen out from the scurvy so far?
This is forced. 2 sets of dentures. No scurvy. So the scurvy's, I think, the reference to vitamin C and all of that sort of stuff. So I think one of the issues that I've come across in conversation with clients, and we're right, because I used to believe all of these things as well. You need your vegetables, you need your fruits, you need your vitamin C, you need your fiber. But all of the research that has shown that is potentially positive for us. One, it's observational research, so it doesn't show causative, doesn't show that those things actually cure or cause certain things to happen. They're just seen in populations. Fill in a questionnaire. This is what we eat. Those people seem to get less of this condition. But they're all compared. The normal diet that we have in this country is rubbish. It's the processed foods. It's high carb, high sugar, high seed oil, high carb and high fat together, I would say it is. And therefore you're comparing. What we don't have is long-term research from our society about a low-carb, animal-based food diet. There are populations where we have got certainly anecdotal evidence from this, and maybe sort of more in-depth case study write-ups on what indigenous populations would eat, for example, the Inuit, but we don't seem to class that as evidence. Certainly in the research world, the scientific research world. So nobody has compared a fiber full diet with a carnivore diet long term. So we don't have that research. What we do have is anecdotal reports from people who have been on carnivore long term. So there are quite a few, as in the carnivore world, famous people now online: Sean Baker, Anthony Chafee, Ken Berry, Judy Cho, all of these types of people. You've got some quite heavyweight scientists now in the psychiatric world: Georgia Reeds, Chris Palmer, who are looking at metabolic therapy for mental health. So we're looking at it from a physical point of view. Typically keto and carnivore seen as a weight loss thing, but so many things seem to anecdotally improve we did a podcast on it. That study of 2,000 people self-reported. Pretty much every modern diseases of civilization or plagues of prosperity, whatever you want, non-communicable diseases, all seem to anecdotally have massive improvements when people are eating in this way. And it's certainly something I felt. If blood pressure, waist circumference, body fat composition, fatty liver, all of these types of things are markers of metabolic ill health, and they also then predispose to many different conditions. All of those markers for me have improved. And this is what I felt when I did the anti-cancer protocol. It was like I was eating for a specific anti-cancer protocol, but all of those markers improved. And this is like, moves me more to that terrain theory of medicine. You know, people are getting different illnesses and conditions, but actually it's the same cause. It's the way we're living. It's different to the way we were designed to live. So for me, yeah, it's going great. 2 years of carnivore, socially and convenience wise. Once you get your head around it, it's actually very, very convenient. I've saved loads of time cooking. People say, you know, don't you need a cheat day? And I just listened to Sean Baker and I'll nick his line. Well, I have a ribeye steak every day. What do I need a cheat day for?
Yeah.
You know, or I'm going to have bacon and eggs for breakfast. What do I need a cheat day for? So, and when I'm consistent with it, I don't crave the carbs. It's only when I don't have enough, or if I actually have carbs, having carbs makes me crave more. Eating this way, I very rarely crave anything. I look forward to my meat, but I don't crave it. I'm just really looking forward to it. I don't feel addicted to it in the same way that I feel addicted to crisps and biscuits when I used to eat them, and chocolate bars and beer and all that sort of stuff. It's a different feeling, that need to have those things. And I can quite happily go for hours on end without food.
The cheat day line that or question, don't you need a cheat day? That's a really interesting one, because the implication is that you're doing something that's unenjoyable, and that you're going to have to at some point let off some steam, go mad on whatever it is that you would otherwise enjoy, pizzas, chocolates, whatever.
Yeah. Can I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
interject
go ahead.
there to mention one of our coaching clients? I'll not mention his name. When he said, I'm only eating what I'm eating now, which was a plant-based diet with a little bit of meat, because that's what I thought was healthy. But you've just made my day by telling me I can eat meat. And then he started posting photos to us on our little coaching group, our WhatsApp group, about what he was eating and saying how happy he was and how good he felt doing it. And I think that's what I felt. I'm not depriving myself. I never particularly, vegetables were cool. I convinced myself that I like them, but I can live without them. I can more easily live without vegetables than I can without meat, for me personally. And I get that there are many people that aren't in that camp, and that's fine. I'm not telling them they should do that. I still think they could think about the principles behind what we're doing and employ that into their own nutritional strategies, which is essentially lowering, for me, insulin, but that's another topic. So yeah, in terms of how it's worked for me, I'd say pretty good.
Good.
No, people ask me, they're still asking me, are you still doing that carnivore thing? And I go, yeah. And they're like, well, are you going to go back? And I'm like, at the moment, I can honestly not think of a reason why I would go back. And if anything, the longer I go on, the more reasons I seem to feel and experience to actually get even stricter in terms of maybe more just red meat based, maybe a bit of shellfish and water, because actually I'm feeling the benefits of doing that.
Yeah, I've certainly been through phases where I've been really strict like that. And the most interesting thing for me was that the desire to eat anything else just started to fall away. So when I was at my strictest, eating pretty much just red meat, salt and water, a little bit of fish, even like the desire for a cup of coffee went away completely. It actually seemed quite disgusting. Um,
Can I ask
so I
you
thought,
then, on the back of
yeah,
that,
hmm
and it's a question I get a lot of time, and it's the
mm,
fear that most people say is like, I could never do this. Do
mm.
you do you experience a sense of loss from that? From
Um, uh, yeah, so I think there was a little. Um, and that's probably why I did go back to introducing some other
yeah,
things and an occasional cup of coffee. For me, drinking a cup of coffee is not necessarily just about the taste. It's about going to a
yeah,
nice coffee shop and having that little bit of time. I think we've talked about this before. It's a little treat. It's the whole experience. I never feel better for having a cup of coffee, to be perfectly honest. I always feel like I've had just a little bit of poison that tasted nice, but I still do it occasionally.
I
Um,
did it for a while with sparkling water.
yeah.
Doesn't It's not quite the same, I
Hmm.
have to say. But then caffeine is a drug, so
Yeah.
as well. So that clearly would have an impact on how we
Mm,
experience it. But yeah, so yeah, similar, a little bit of a sense of loss for me. But in the food, I
mm.
don't miss my Chinese takeaways and things like that. I don't feel that sense of loss. I perhaps feel a sense of loss in the social aspect of being, how do I deal with those meals
Yeah.
now, if at all?
Yeah, I did watch my wife eat a pizza and enjoy every single bite of it when we went out for a meal recently.
Uh-huh.
And I was a little jealous, and I did think, yeah, I could take a I could take a slice of that pizza and thoroughly enjoy it. I didn't. I had a nice steak instead. It was a
Yeah.
really good steak. Um, it was at a
That's,
restaurant. The,
yeah.
the
Sorry, go on.
portion was a little small, so
Hmm.
my compromise was I bought some cheese on the way home and
Uh,
just enjoyed some nice, good quality cheese. Not a full pizza with all the rest of it with all the carbs. So
yeah.
yeah, a, sort of a halfway measure that was perfectly good.
Yeah.
Um,
I just wanted to give a shout out actually to a friend of mine and squash colleague, Martin Jolly, and our whole team actually.
mhm,
Um, because bizarrely we've got a vegetarian and a carnivore on our squash team. So the squash dinners are always a little bit, there's always a good topic of conversation there.
mm,
But for our team bash, Martin was really cool. He wanted to sort of go out for a meal and he picked a local Turkish restaurant where he knew that I could satisfy my carnivore diet. So I just wanted to
mm,
give Martin a shout out there for that, and the rest for all coming along to the same place. And
yeah,
interestingly, two of the guys just had the biggest mixed grill going, all
yeah,
meat, and
yeah.
every minute of it. Um,
Yeah, well, if we're talking about eating out, I'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm
mhm,
traveling right now. I've been in Thailand for just over 4 weeks. I'm here for another four. So quite a long period away from home. Um, and yeah, if you're on or if you're eating in some kind of way like a carnivore diet or a keto diet, it can be pretty challenging when you're traveling. Most of the places we're staying, we haven't got cooking facilities, so we have to choose from what is available to us in cafes, restaurants, or any other options that we can find. Um, I've travelled before in other places that are much more restricted like than this. For example, Pakistan a few times. Uh, when I was traveling there, I was trying to eat more of a paleo diet, and that was a real challenge when you're in a village in Pakistan, I can assure you. Um,
uh,
so here in Thailand, the Thais seem to love their food, and there's all kinds of things available. But yeah, sticking to a carnivore diet, very difficult on occasion. The place we are at the moment, it's a pretty big town with a lot of tourism, but as far as I can see, there's no large supermarket. There's one sort of small, medium supermarket where you can buy food if you've got cooking facilities and prepare it yourself.
mhm,
Um, in the bigger cities, they have some really good supermarkets, way better than I've seen in the UK. where you can buy cooked food. They'll have a huge choice of different types of meat and fish. Some of these supermarkets as well have this setup where you can buy yourself a piece of meat, and there's a kind of food court arrangement where they'll cook the food for you there
Oh
and then.
wow, that's
Um,
brilliant.
yeah, and they've got sort of restaurant type seating, so you can sit down, have a really nice, comfortable meal. Prices are pretty decent compared to Europe. So yeah, you can get yourself some really good quality food in some of the bigger
Hmm.
places. But where we are now, we don't have that option. So um, it's mainly sort of food that's catering for tourists.
Great.
So pretty tricky so far. 7-Elevens are everywhere, and these are tiny little supermarkets that sell a bit of everything you can imagine.
Uh,
All kinds of processed foods, all kinds of sweetened drinks.
yeah.
Um, in those, about the only things that you can find that I would call real food, a little bit of fruit. They
Uh,
have nuts.
yeah.
They do have boiled eggs at
Okay.
various degrees of cookedness. So you can have soft boiled, hard boiled,
Oh wow, really?
or medium boiled, which is pretty amazing. And those are pretty good actually.
Do
Um,
they have butter there?
they do have butter in 7-Elevens, but most of the food that you find in there is a less good version of what you could probably find in a bigger supermarket. So,
Hmm.
but what is called pure butter, if you look at the label, it's actually got quite a few additives in there,
Right.
colorings and milk
Oh yeah.
powder. So it's not really proper
Okay.
butter as such.
Yeah.
You can buy cooked chicken breast in these things, but again, it's got like a ton of preservatives and God
Mm.
knows what else. So yeah, if you're stuck and all you can find is a 7-Eleven, you can at least get yourself some eggs and chicken and fruit and nuts. And it's not perfect, but it's probably better than a lot of other options. So yeah, the Thai food that is available, that covers a whole kind of range of options. Yeah, I've spoken to people previously who said, "Yeah, Thai food, that's probably really healthy, isn't it? That's probably really good for you." Well, it's a pretty broad category. There's a lot of different choices within Thai
Yes.
food.
It's like
Typically,
Mediterranean diet. It sounds like,
yeah,
oh, the Mediterranean. Then what is a Mediterranean diet? Yeah. Go on.
yeah. So yeah, typically, carbs are involved with most meals. Rice
Yeah.
or noodles seem to be the most popular forms of carbs, and it looks like, I guess, what some of the more traditional meals, they do have protein, but not huge amounts.
Hmm.
Um, so let's
Just
say
gonna
you
look
ought,
up, whilst you're chatting, I'm just gonna see if I can find any statistics on heart disease and diabetes for Thailand because I know
yeah, okay,
India.
yeah, go ahead. I wish I'd
You,
done
you,
that
you, you,
beforehand,
you
actually.
carry you carry on talking, and I'll message.
Sure.
I'll
Yeah.
message my
So
mate.
what's interesting to observe is that there aren't that many people who are overweight. Um, People seem to look pretty lean. People seem to have good posture. Um, but yeah, the diet's very heavy in carbs. Protein
Yeah.
amounts, I think, are probably not that high. Um, Generally lean protein, apart from pork bellies, seems to be quite popular. Um,
Yeah.
I think one of the main sources of fats is probably coconut. A lot of the dishes are
Hmm.
cooked in coconut, coconut milk, coconut cream. Sugary drinks are everywhere. Everyone's walking down the road carrying a large cup of something cold with ice and lots of sugar in it. So I think in general, the diet is pretty high in carbs and sugar. So a bit challenging if you're trying to avoid those things. If you're trying to eat a high protein, high fat diet, it's quite hard to find. Um, I travelled here last year as well for the same sort of period of time and had to adjust what I was doing. I just couldn't really find the fatty cuts of meat very
Yeah.
easily, other than pork. Um, Beef is not as widely eaten. It is available, but it's not as
Hmm.
widely available. So yeah, I had to modify what I was doing last time. I
Yeah.
ended up introducing a little bit of carbs. I ended up eating a little bit of rice and some fruit, and actually generally felt fine with it overall. The one thing
Hmm.
that I didn't like was I find with a higher carb, lower fat diet, just increased hunger. Um, you get
Yeah.
those the energy dips in between meals and the
Hmm.
increased hunger. Um, but yeah, zooming out a little bit, one of the reasons why I got into a carnivore diet and a high fat diet was that appetite regulation.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, this time I am trying to avoid getting back onto the carbs. Trying my best to eat eat fattier meat when I can find it, or just eat a bit more protein. Um, I don't think it's ideal eating a high protein diet long term, but for a couple of months, I think it's fine. It's not going to be a big issue. The fruit
Yeah.
here is the fruit here is great. You know, it's all local, tastes really good. So having a little bit of that back in the diet. I think overall I'm still probably ketogenic most of the time, probably dipping out of it occasionally with a little bit of fruit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's a challenge, but the way I try and look at these things is carnivore is a diet that's had a lot of benefits for me, but I think you can still get a lot of benefit and be, for some people, be 100% healthy just on a whole foods diet. And the way I would classify that is avoiding two or three in particular processed foods. So avoiding refined oils, so processed oils,
Hmm.
avoiding refined sugars. For me, I go a little bit further. I'll try and avoid as much as possible, even natural sugars, fruit and fruit juices, and sugar in the form of carbs. So
Hmm.
um, that's a category of foods I'll generally try and reduce. Um, and the other one is refined grains, so anything made out of flour. I think if you generally avoid those kinds of things, it will still leave you with a lot of food options. Um,
Yeah.
and I think, you know, many people will do absolutely fine on that kind of diet. So, for example, the other day I had a couple of dishes. I had a curry that had some vegetables in there. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Enjoyed having the vegetables, which I hadn't had for a while. It was a welcome change. And had a soup, a kind of traditional soup that also had some vegetables in there.
Yeah.
Had a good amount of chicken in there. So overall, the two dishes made quite a high protein meal, not particularly high fat, and a welcome change of adding a few veggies back in there. Um, yeah, my hair didn't fall out. I didn't wake up with a rash or anything like that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't cause me any problems whatsoever. And even before I came here, actually, I had started to experiment with a slightly different diet, bringing in some vegetables again, and had been enjoying that and not seeing any ill effects from it.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that just goes to show it's like there there will be different responses to what goes on. I think what's quite clear from me is that and for those listening, and anyone who might listen to this, um, it's been a journey of 15 plus years for me to get to where I am now. From first when I had cancer, I'd started exploring paleo just before cancer through CrossFit. And I explored keto after cancer and vegetarian and stuff. So, you know, and where I was a total takeaway aholic, Chinese, Indian, Thai, you name it, I'd have it, kebabs, alcohol, a carbaholic, really. So I have to keep remembering back to the way I was and how I would have thought then if someone said to me, just eat meat. Really? I would have said. Yeah, probably would have got a load of swear words on the back of it as well. Um, but it is, I have to keep reminding myself because I forget very easily. It's a journey. And, you know, there's many different things that play into that. And yeah, every now and then I like, oh, there's a like a sugar snap peas, peas munch too or whatever, or a piece of broccoli, and all that's really nice. Or I fancy a bit of coleslaw with the steak if I'm in a pub or whatever. Um, but on the whole, a bit like you said, when I go to the meat and water, the stricter I go, the less I desire those other things. Um, so I don't, is there a right or wrong to it? I think you got to go with it, and are you getting the health benefits that you want from it?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to mention actually. So I said that one of my reasons for getting into a more ketogenic ketogenic or carnivore diet was the energy and appetite management. So having more
Mm,
consistent energy, not having those huge hunger cravings. But probably equally important to that was I'd had years of like irritable bowel syndrome, um,
mm,
many food intolerances, and I didn't rapidly get into a carnivore diet. It was a gradual process of me cutting out one thing and another and another. And then when I actually heard about the carnivore diet, it made sense to give it a try as, the ultimate elimination diet, I guess. And for me, it did help. It did alleviate a lot of symptoms, but it wasn't 100% improvement. It was kind of 80%.
yeah,
Now, since I've been traveling, I've been away, I've been feeling absolutely fine. I haven't had any issues from a digestive point of view, and I've been less strict with my diet. Um, so I think that's worth mentioning because um, I don't think diet is the only factor in these in with conditions like IBS, or at least not for myself. Um, Other factors that might be playing a part is I'm not working as much as I would when I'm in the UK. I'm still working. I'm still working 5 days a week, but probably half as many hours as I would, maybe even slightly less than half as many hours. So stress levels are way lower.
yeah.
Um, Also, the weather here is good. I'm out in the sun. I'm probably doing 20,000 steps a day, just walking around at an easy pace. Um, So stress levels are lower, movement's more, way more time outside, way more sunshine. I think all of these things factor in. So yeah, if there is anyone listening who's thinking about carnivore as an elimination diet, I think it is worth a try. And I think there's plenty of people out there who would say that it's worked for them. But also think about these other factors. What are your stress levels like?
Yeah.
What's your exposure to natural light like? How much just gentle movement are you getting in a day? These are things which I think are equally important.
Well, it's funny you should mention all of those things because um, something we have been working on, both of us, working wise, is developing online coaching. And we talk about all of these things in detail on that. So most people typically think about health, diet and exercise, and they are two key areas of life. But even with those two, people often can't resolve their situation. So, both of us through our history have encountered quite serious conditions, and through that we've learned a lot, and we've learned to try and design a life that supports our health rather than one that doesn't. So yeah, that's just something we've been working on. So just watch out for that. Anyone who might be interested, or if you know of someone who might be interested, whether it's someone who's recovering from illness or where maybe we're, both of us are a bit close right now, is like, I've recovered from cancer and I'm looking at playing the British Masters Open squash in June and trying to, how do I get to my next personal best in squash at the age of 58 going on 59. So, and it's not that we teach carnivore per se. I like Richard Smith's take on this. We teach what we believe is generally nutrition for optimum health is what we're searching for and what we're looking for and what we're trying to do for ourselves would be, I think. Would you agree with that, Imran?
Yeah, 100%. I'm open to other approaches. I mean, I've at this point, I think I've tried almost every diet except for raw vegan. And yeah, I mean, something I started looking at recently was a GAPS diet. You can do a
Yeah,
GAPS diet in a kind of carnivore way. So yeah, it's not about just one methodology. It's the outcomes that we're looking for, really. And yeah, getting tied to just one set of ideas, I don't think is particularly beneficial.
no, but I do think there are biological principles at play here, which unfortunately most of our dietary guidelines haven't been based upon biological principles. They've been based on observational studies, which we've talked about before. Um, Now I think there is a lot more research and the measuring the, the technology behind the science is a lot better now. The research methods are a lot better, and we're able to see things very differently. We still will be struggling with time frames for getting enough research on carnivore, for instance, to say that it's safe. Um, there are currently studies that have just been done, initial studies, which don't prove anything per se at this moment, but the lean mass hyperresponder studies that Dave Failgate, Nick Norowitz,
Mhm.
Professor Budok have done, looking at plaque progression linked or not linked, as it turns out, to LDLs in lean mass hyperresponders. So we're starting to see research challenging conventional wisdom coming out now. My philosophy for myself is not, I've always had the question mainstream science. When I had cancer, mainstream didn't have an answer for me. Uh, you had a 50% chance, 50% chance of survival, 5 year survival, that is. And we can't tell you which 50% you'll fall in. So they actually knew very little in terms of that. And when I asked about what can I do, nothing. Just take your medicine. My oncologist got to a stage where I'm almost interested to know what you're doing. He's had to look at the way he treats my particular cancer because of my results. Because given that I only had a third of the possible treatments, I had the chemotherapy, I didn't have the radiotherapy, and I didn't have surgery. And I'm doing way better than pretty much any of his other patients with this type of cancer. Now, that doesn't necessarily prove anything, but I like to suggest it proves that I took some element of control. I did research, not necessarily always the best research, but over time now, these things are coming out. We are seeing circadian rhythm. So part of my alternative protocol was get sunshine every day. 40 minutes of sunshine. Now, if you tie that into research on circadian rhythms and biology and the impacts of disrupted circadian rhythms on health, that now makes perfect sense. She was very much a whole foods person, but there was a big element of cottage cheese and flax oil. And I lost weight hand over fist. And it turns out that cottage cheese has one of the amino acids that is triggered by the nutrient sensors that tells us we're full. So again, that appetite regulation you talked about, social connection, all of these things started coming out, and these are there. And I think that's, as a personal trainer, I got frustrated because people would come to me for a physical solution, but often, yeah, sometimes it worked, but often it wouldn't. I now know that everything is connected, and physical problems, pain, etc., could be related to stress at work, could be related to what you eat. High insulin levels predispose you to higher incidence of muscle, tendon, ligament strain, which is something I've only found out recently. But it explains all the injuries I was getting in my 30s and 40s, playing far less squash than I am now. And I'm not getting injured now. I had a slight thigh strain last week, and I had a calf strain when I came down and saw you in June last year. Those are the only two strains that I've had, and I've been able to get back into squash very quickly on the back of, I think, the diet strategies and also the movement strategies, the fascia stuff that we've been looking at.
Mm. Nice segue. So what are you doing? Let's give us an update on what you're doing training wise then, or
Uh,
movement wise.
I don't, to be honest, I don't think I train anymore.
Mm.
I really, I don't have 3 sessions a week that I do. I kind of, I have my, I basically, I got myself a job where I get a certain amount of my physical work that I need to on court, and I can kind of manipulate that sometimes. I can't always, depending on the needs of the client, but I can manipulate how much or how little I do. So I've actually designed my life in terms of the work I do to get a certain amount of physical work in. I play squash in friendlies and competitive, so I play in a team. And I've started playing tournaments in the last 2-3 years, which I couldn't do previously because I just always got injured. And then I play around with the fascial stuff. I've gone away from weights, and I'm considering bringing it back in at some stage, weight training. But I play around with little aspects of the hyperarch fascia stuff and the Jack Thompson stuff. I've been looking at the I Am Longevity guy on YouTube, and I like his take on longevity. He talks very much about motor units,
Mm.
the need to be able to express skillful and powerful movement and complex movement. And I do think that's a big part to play, because when you look at old people, what can't they do? They can't balance. They've got very little agility. They fall over easily. They can't pick themselves up once they've fallen over. They can't lift heavy objects. They couldn't fight or defend themselves. That's the typical decline we see. And so I started a little sprint workout, nothing massive, 6 seconds, sprinting up a hill with the rest of the minute as recovery. Do that a few times. And then maybe one longer sprint to try and get into some aerobic capacity, metabolic work. So that's the first bit of training I've started, really, like that I consider, right, I'm going to schedule this and do this twice a week. And I set up a training schedule with ChatGPT. I mean, that's an interesting thing that I'm doing here, is using ChatGPT as just someone to bounce ideas off of. And so with my training, I talked about this, how do I fit this in with the fascia stuff, etc. But yeah, essentially that, a little bit of sprint work. I'm going to try and formalize that a bit more. I've got a squash tournament this weekend, and I'm seeded in the graded bit that I'm in. I'm seeded to reach the semi-finals. So I've got 2 or 3 matches, and I could possibly get to the final. So just resting this week, really. There's a little bit of sharpness here and there playing, but next week hopefully start training sprints, more fascia work, looking to bring isometrics in, isometric lunges and things like that in, but in short bouts that don't knacker me. Essentially, I notice from my squash, when I play too much squash, that's when I struggle. I feel down, and also maybe need to eat more on the back of that. What
So
about
what
yourself?
that's, let me just see if I've got that right. What that
Yeah,
sounds like is you're actually playing a lot, and then
yeah,
doing a small amount of stuff that's going to keep you playing longer
yeah. Someone
and
asked
better.
me. We were talking about running. I'm meeting a friend later. She's going for a run, and she says, "Yeah, when do you do your runs?" And she does hers every morning, and I'm like, you know what? I do little run repeats randomly through the day, and not every day, but I'll come back, and sometimes I think I'll take the rubbish down. And we live in an apartment block, and there's a long car park, and it's not far off 100 meters long, maybe 70 meters. and I'll do repeats up there, and I'll do it along the lines of I can't remember his name now. The runner that we coached one of our clients with, Shane Benzie.
Oh yeah.
Because he used a fascial approach to running, which gelled with the ideas that we're talking about. And I practice running, and I will do 70 meters, walk back, and do that anything up to 10 times, but maybe just 3 or 4, and I'll go back up. So yeah, playing with it, keeping myself mobile. I need to keep myself fresh for work, and then maybe tournaments. So I don't want to do too much. Off season now, I might do a little bit more. But yeah, I play with the kettlebell. I've got a kettlebell in the room. Hidden under all the junk here somewhere. Maybe Mum's put it away. Here it is. There you go. I'll just jump in and do a few squats with that. Maybe a few clean jerks, overhead press, and do 5 reps. And then go and do something else. It's something I know I can do without a warm up. I'll do Hindu squats, but just random play. So not training at the moment specifically for anything, just trying to stay fit for my work and life in general.
Yeah, there's some similarities with me. You know, I coach boxing, so there's a fair amount of movement involved in that. I'm often moving around with the person that I'm coaching, so I might be holding pads for them. I'm trying to show them the footwork. A lot of the time, the approach that I'm using is a kind of monkey see, monkey do approach. So I'll move in a way, and I'm trying to get them to imitate my movement.
Yeah.
And people do seem to learn quite quickly from that approach. Some do. There's different approaches for different people, but overall, it does mean that I'm doing boxing-based movement a lot.
Yes.
Now, I'm not doing it at a very high intensity most of the time, but there's quite a lot of reps will happen in a normal week. That's fine. I enjoy that. So I do a lot of sort of what I would describe as low to medium intensity stuff. One of the drawbacks of boxing, though, is it's a very imbalanced sport. Typically, the way that you stand, you're using one side of your body quite differently from the other. So I do like to do quite a bit of stuff to keep balance. When I was younger, I ended up with a very imbalanced physique. I started getting pains in my back and my hip down one side because the one side was just very was working differently to the other. So it took me a good few months to address that and kind of even things out. So yeah, I probably do more stuff that you'd describe as training, and that's one is to keep balance in the physique. The other reason is that for a long time, for the last it's got to be 3 or even 4 years, I've been trying to recover the ability to sprint. Now that's a long time that's taken a long time to get that back. Now, during that time, there have been times where I have been able to run sprints absolutely fine. But unfortunately, it's the job that has probably been the biggest obstacle. When you're doing boxing, you're spending a lot of time on the balls of your feet, bouncing.
Yeah.
So it's quite a lot of work on the feet, ankles, calves. Then if you're trying to sprint as well, that's a huge amount of load on the same areas of the body.
Yeah.
So, you've got to be careful how much of this stimulus you introduce when you're already using those areas quite a bit. And the reason I think it become a struggle for me was I picked up this kind of calf injury. Years of muscle-based training, years of lifting weights, and thinking that was something essential that I had to do. You mentioned fascia-based training, so yeah, I got into this probably 2-3 years ago as well, doing the hyperarch fascia training. That was a huge help. That's mostly reduced the pain in my calves. You got me into Jack Thompson's work as well. I like to
on the back of having you introduced me to hyperarch fascia
Yeah.
there.
And I like to mention the names of these people because
Yeah.
we've got tremendous benefit from them. So that's Coach Chongzi. I trained with him for 12 weeks. He's hyperarch fascia training, and then Jack Thompson's got some similar ideas, but yeah, a lot of things are just slightly different. So I really
What I
enjoyed
would like,
looking into that.
yeah. So, and maybe we can put links to some of this in the
Mm,
post afterwards.
yeah.
Chong is, yeah, he's very expensive, and but he's a scientist, and there's a lot of rigor into what he does. And I've joined his Patreon channel. Um, Jack Thompson gives away a lot more in his course for a lot less in that sense. And his fascia training course is $100, I think. So for anyone who's interested, go and have a look. Have a look at Jack
Mm,
Thompson Fascia Power on YouTube. There's quite a lot. He's got a lot of exercises you can do for free on YouTube. But when you go through his course, it makes really good sense. Um, and I think, like you said, both of us have found positive benefits to that. You mentioned running and boxing. I had the same issue with running and squash. I would always pull a calf muscle or an Achilles or
mm,
something going wrong. I can now run on the same day that I've played squash. Not extensive running. I'm not pushing it yet. I can do my repeats though, and build them up to quite a fast pace. And I can still do that. I can do it even after I've played squash. I wouldn't even have dared attempted it before. So, uh,
yeah. I think the other thing that I've added to that has been Gota. So
yeah,
my reason for wanting to maintain the ability to sprint is I think it's a unique movement that only humans run in that particular bipedal way, and I think it's our ultimate expression of athleticism, really. And I
yeah,
think if you were only going to do one thing, it would be maintaining the ability to sprint. And yeah, I lost that because of these calf injuries, and it's
yeah,
been on. I would say over the last few years, the last 3 or 4 years, it's been an on and off ability that I've had. At the moment, it's going great. Ran a couple. Wouldn't even call them sprints at the moment. I'll call them efforts or bursts where I just run a bit faster for a little while. So I did a couple of those this morning. It felt great. No pain in the calf whatsoever. But I think what added to the fascial work was a system called Gota, which I encountered online. That was just over 2 years ago, and since then I've gone through their certification. I'm almost completed my level 2 certification, and I think they're really talking about something unique that I haven't seen anywhere else, and that would be the positions that our body goes into to handle load, to handle what they refer to as pressure. They call it the pressure wave. So, let's just take the example of a sprint. They've observed that people who have long careers running fast and don't get injured move in a certain way that respects the sort of efficiency of the body and the way the body's designed to absorb force and transfer force.
yeah,
So that's been a really interesting journey learning that. And I'd say I'm still a long way from mastering those techniques. I've definitely seen some improvements. I feel like my posture's got way better. I find myself standing up straight without having to think about it. I feel like I'm walking differently. So there's some improvements there. I think once I start increasing the speed of what I'm doing, the weaknesses start to show up more. So the faster I run, the worse it starts to look.
hmm,
So there's still plenty of work to be done there. But I'm 50 and I've got 50 years of doing things a certain way. So trying to do things a different way tends to take a little bit longer than, say, if you were 20. The patterns of movement that I've got are pretty well ingrained. So it takes a bit more time and patience to ingrain something different. But something that goes alongside that, and I think is very accessible to people, and has a lot of similarities, is Original Strength. So this is a guy
Yeah,
called Tim Anderson. Now, I read
yeah,
his book, Pressing Reset, a few years ago. Absolutely great book, and I did exactly what I do with most of these things: is absorbed about 10% of it, and then went on to the next really interesting book. And I just came back to it a couple of months ago, reread it, and I saw a lot of parallels with the go-to stuff. A lot of the movement training is actually quite similar. There
yeah.
are some differences, but he also talks about the ability to sprint and
Hmm.
maintaining that at some level. Um, it might be initially you just get back the ability to jog if you haven't run for a long time. Just
Yeah.
getting back the ability to jog could be a really big win for you. And then gradually over time, you could speed that up. And that's kind of where I've been really the last few
Hmm.
months is, I just had to get back the ability to jog first of all.
Yeah.
So he's a guy I've got a great deal of respect for. His book is, I think everyone should read that if you've got pain in your movement or
It's a
um,
great book, and he's got a great YouTube channel as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Gives away a lot of stuff free that's really
yeah,
useful.
I use a lot of his movement snacks in
Hmm.
personal training and for myself. They're just fun. Big
Mm.
advocate of crawling as well.
Yeah.
So the development, and if you think about, I think a lot of this ties back to how humans develop as children. They
Mm.
develop their core by rolling,
Mm.
crawling, stuff like that, and link the various fascial chains through those
Hmm.
activities. It has a massive impact on development of the brain as well. And then that leads to walking and running, walking,
Mm.
jogging, running. Yeah, they like his stuff.
Yeah, so both of these systems that I've mentioned, Tim Anson, Original Strength, and GoTo, they actually use this progression. They start you back off on the floor, going through crawling patterns. They gradually get progressed, and hopefully the end result is that you end up sprinting like an athlete, pain free, without any need to warm up. One of the things I'm doing now is you could argue that I'm training right now. So I'm sitting on a surface that is it's raised, but I'm essentially it's as though I'm sitting on the floor. So I'm sitting on a slightly padded surface, cross-legged, been
Hmm.
changing my positions a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is almost like free training. It doesn't cost you any energy, but a great line which go to talk about a lot, which they actually got from someone else, Philip Beach, is that the flip side of movement is rest, and they're two sides of the same coin. So how you rest affects how you move,
Mm.
and we know this. We've talked about this previously. We spend far
Yeah.
too much time sitting in general, but particularly
Yeah.
sitting in chairs. So it's perfectly normal for us to rest. We haven't got to be active 24 hours a day. And I think research on hunter-gatherers has shown that they actually do spend quite a lot of time resting. They
They
spend,
sit as much. Yeah, they rest as much as we do, and
yeah,
sit as
but
much
they
as we
rest
do.
differently.
Yeah.
They're resting on the floor, and they're sitting in certain positions, which you'll see quite commonly in all kinds of different cultures. Resting squats, sitting cross-legged, sitting with their legs out straight, various sort of forms of kneeling, half kneeling. So now I've got like one knee up and
Yeah.
one knee down. And yeah, you can just cycle through these positions. And at first they can be pretty uncomfortable if you haven't done them for a long time. But yeah, I've got some cushions here so I can kind of
Yeah.
just sit
Well,
with my hips up a little bit. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's
that
interesting because that whole you mentioned the word comfortable,
mm,
and um, ah, can't remember her name now. It will come to me. Um, Movie DNA, Katie
Katie
Bowman.
Bowman. Yeah.
Yeah, and she talks about this idea that we have bony protuberances, so to actually make us move, to make being still uncomfortable, because when we evolved, there were typically only hard surfaces available. You could maybe fashion a soft surface with some leaves and stuff like that, but typically you'd have a hard surface to lie on. And those bony protuberances make you move, which keeps the muscles moving, keeps the lymph action going, provides some part of the blood pumping because it opens up blood capillaries to different muscle groups. We've just got too good at becoming comfortable we've got to the situation now where we have padded chairs, sofas, and you can stay in one position for so long. And I think that's what's detrimental. And we weren't meant to be that still. In hospital, if you stay still, they have to give you physical therapy. If you're comatose or if you can't physically move yourself, they either give you these funny wobbly mattresses to try and stop you getting bed sores. Pressure sores come from a lack of movement whilst compressed on a surface. And patients have to get manual physiotherapy to stop them shrinking into a fetal position, especially if they're comatose. So, we've got too good at being comfortable. And I think as part of our coaching with all of our clients, we've introduced these movements. Can you spend 20 minutes on the floor whilst watching TV, for instance, and go through these various positions? And the more you will get comfortable with them after a while.
Yeah, and I have experienced a lot of benefit with these. Certain positions I've noticed, they do come out in your posture, in your standing. I've noticed that I don't really stretch anymore. I used to be stretching all the time. I was constantly feeling tight somewhere. Even though I got really flexible, I could get into all these different yoga positions, but I still felt tight. People would see me doing my stretches or whatever, and they say, "Wow, you're really flexible. How do you do that?" But I didn't feel good. I was stretching and stretching to try and alleviate this tightness. So it can seem kind of counterintuitive that you've got great flexibility, but you actually still feel tight. Since I just spend more time on the floor and doing these crawling movements and this original strength and go to tight movement, I hardly ever stretch. Occasionally, I'll get something where I think, okay, I need to stretch that, and I've got enough knowledge to know, when it's appropriate to. Generally, I don't need to though. So that's a huge time saving. Just generally feel better and feel more injury resilient than I was before. And it hasn't really cost me anything. I'm doing things that I would normally do. I'm just sitting on the floor doing them. That's been a big benefit and definitely something worthwhile.
This office chair.
your comfortable chair, slacker.
But I have to agree with you. Just when you do that type of stuff, it's like I don't think anyone should need to stretch. Stretching has become a byproduct of a sedentary lifestyle. In a 90-90 knees and hips position. As you say, if you look at yourself there, your knees tucked under your armpit, so you've got fully flexed hip and you've got a fully flexed knee. Well, it's a position that we typically don't have in modern day life, and we train young babies and children out of it from the moment we start putting them in high chairs. And we've started doing that. Now, that was a cultural. We never assessed whether doing that was right or not. But now it's there. To change it, we got to prove it's safe, and this, that, and the other. But my advice to a lot of people with their kids is you get down on the floor with the kids, don't sit in chairs. But I've even heard school teachers say, "Well, we're training them for office life." And but office life is unhealthy. Let's change office life. Let's why promote an environment that promotes poor health, poor movement, physical aches and pains? I think that for me is the big thing that I've realized over the last 15 years. The modern environment doesn't actively promote physical longevity or mental longevity. We have medicine that helps, gives us a band-aid to the problems we have, treats the symptoms we have, but it doesn't stop the root cause of all the problems. But we could just simply make simple tweaks to our environment for a lot of the stuff as you're doing there. I think we've been going nearly an hour and a quarter.
Yeah, okay.
Would that be a good place?
Could be, yeah. There were some other things which we can say for another time. We're talking about our mental strategies. Let's save that for the next time. I think
Yeah,
we've gone into quite.
I think that's a big topic, and I
Yeah,
think the reason we do all the stuff is underpinned by a mindset we have. Now, it's not to say that we're better people because we've got that mindset. I think a lot of it's come around by luck, but I do now believe that there are ways to now program that type of mindset that you need for good health and all the stuff, because it's not easy in the modern world. So yeah, that's the next podcast, should we say?
yeah, we'll do that one next. It's something that we've both
Brilliant.
been exploring, and yeah,
Yeah,
that should be a good chat.
fantastic. All right. Well, thanks a lot. In carry on enjoying Thailand.
Thank you. Yeah, and anyone listening, yeah, we'll be talking a little bit more about the coaching program that we're making available. We're going to be making available a short intro program fairly soon. So yeah, feel free to get in touch with us if you want to know more about that. That's going to be
Yeah,
available very soon, I think.
and I think yeah, just we've touched on a few things that might be involved with it, but we're looking at how to thrive in later life, 50s and beyonds, how to thrive physically and mentally. So yeah, great. All right.
Okay.
Till next time. All right.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Bye.